Hello, I'm Maxwell Sobieski, and today we'll be looking at Tsutsumu. Before we take a look at Tsutsumu, it's important that we understand two distinct Japanese philosophies. The first one being wa, which is visually represented by the kanji figure of an ear of grain next to an open mouth. This is a way of life that has come to be understood as definitive of Japanese aesthetic and cultural values, centered around retaining harmony, balance, flexibility, softness, and respect, and a closeness to the organic beauty of nature. And Mono no Aware, which roughly translates to the gentle sadness in nature and the deeper appreciation of transient beauty found in life. Although it is hard to put under one definitive meaning, it is most effectively understood as an introspective admiration for the inevitable passing of the material world through time and the joy found in passing moments of bliss. This is really well represented by this Japanese water pot with a lacquered lid. This is in the museum archives of the Met and was used to hold water used to fill the kettle and rinse the tea during traditional Japanese tea ceremonies. To really understand Tsutsumu, we have to look at the geography of Japan. And the direct meaning of the word Tsutsumu is a broad understanding for the practices of wrapping, which are split up and categorized by geographical regions, uses, and materials, all originating from the abundant natural resources and the agriculture of the many different types of ecoregions that exist across the Japanese archipelago. These regions range from subtropical in the southernmost prefecture of Okinawa to the Arctic tundra of the northernmost prefecture of Hokkaido, encompassing dense forests, jungles, coastal plains, and mountains. This close relationship and proximity between the dense mountainous forests and the Pacific Ocean have in turn very much influenced the culinary, ceremonial, and technical practices of Tsutsumu. These aspects have historically been split up into sections based on the materials used in preparation of each technique, such as the use of wood, including leaves and stems, straw, bamboo, bamboo straw, which is dried and finely peeled strands that are woven instead of whole pieces, paper, and earth, which is just clay, and other techniques including fabric wrapping, known as furoshiki, sorry. It is in these combinations of consumables and common materials that hundreds of inventive and aesthetically varied techniques have arisen over time out of a necessity to allow for the transport and storage of delicate food items. One popular and widely practiced method of tsutsumu in Japan requires taking 5 eggs and stacking them in a hollow column of straw or bamboo straw called tamago suto. This expresses the aesthetically pleasing union between form and function perfectly. This method of wrapping was intended to allow for the easy transport and protection of these delicate packets of protein worn on the hips of manual labor such as loggers and woodcutters that would have scrambled up steep mountain faces, trekked into deep forests, and climbed up trees, all without a fragile egg cracking or falling loose when jostled around or banged against rocks and trees. The overall appearance of this clever packaging enhances the freshness and subtle beauty of the arrangement of eggs, allowing for one side to be viewed through a long window-like gap with a central spine arranged anatomically like a rib cage, with two pointed ends that resemble the thatched roof of countryside huts. It is in this orderly combination of natural objects woven together and transformed through the spirit of the human hand that we can start to see a relationship between the stationary farming practices of Japanese coastal plains and the mobile group of workers such that support a much larger framework of Japanese culture. This is a culture of wooden buildings, wooden objects, and the deeply rooted spiritual artistic significance of wooden Shinto religion as a pure material representative of the impermanence of life and susceptible to the effects of time and natural resources. just to show an example, um, this is the Grand Ise Shrine dedicated to the Shinto goddess Amaterasu. And this shrine is demolished and reconstructed in a 20-year cycle since 5 BC, so like over 2,000 years, from specifically sourced and blessed Japanese cypress from the ancient Hinoki forest. And just to show this, this is made out of the same material, which is really interesting to see. And this is a Kyoto delicacy called namafu, originating in Japanese cuisine, used as a protein-packed meat substitute eaten by Zen Buddhist monks during the 14th century. Over time, the adaptation of this wheat protein was infused into the Japanese tea ceremonies and has become a staple of ryote, which is traditional Japanese haute cuisine. This version is delicately seared with a subtle sweet smoky taste with a drop of rich miso paste infused with pickled umeboshi plum. The woody fragrance of the box and the skewers heightens the experience by adding another depth of flavor to the experience as well as visual intrigue. As you can see, the color and proportion is integral to this type of presentation, and this can be had at a restaurant called uh, and here are some other examples. This is Narazuki pickles, which are dried fruit or vegetables that are cured in salt or cured in sake no kasu, which is like a vinegar used from the excess left over from the making of sake. This is shinsei mame from Kyoto, which is a delicacy created by rolling black bean paste in roasted soybean and green pea powder topped with dry seaweed. And this is shown in a water well shaped box made out of Japanese cypress, showing another image of Japanese cypress used in packaging. And this is sasadango dumplings, rice flour desserts wrapped in bamboo leaves from the Niigata prefecture. This is another example that I consumed. This is sakura leaf mochi with red bean paste. This is like a special delicacy during the springtime. Popular during the sakura season, which lasts from late March into early May. Sakura mochi celebrates the season through the infusion of delicately pickled tree leaves and pickled blossoms around a ball of sweet rice with azuki red bean filling. Traditionally, cherry blossoms have held significant importance to Japanese culture as an example of the beautiful transience of life in connection to Mana no Aware since the Heian period. It was not until 1717 when a guard from the Chomeiji temple in Tokyo began to make these desserts that they became a trademark dessert of springtime. Overall, the flavor is deeply layered, with the sweet nutty flavor of the red bean paste and the mochi complementing the very floral and tangy flavor of the leaf. The leaf itself contained many different sensations that I noticed, from the delicate floral aroma of spring air, with an even slight kind of spice that reminded me of nutmeg, cinnamon, or even rose water, that kind of perfumey flavor that permeates through your nose. And the use of sakura leaves and stems from the Japanese art of wagashi confectionery, which has come to symbolize each of the 72 seasons contained in a year, recognized historically in Japan. Very much in tune with the minute changes, natural changes in vegetation, seasonal plants. These different leaves are used to wrap different food items to prevent them from drying out, while also adding an extra subtle layer of natural flavoring through the wrapping. Depending on the region, plant, seasons, and use, leaves are either fresh, dried, pickled, or salt cured to create an abundant and naturally responsive paper alternative. The consumption of these confectionaries began to gain popularity in the Muromachi period, when sugar was brought to Japan by Chinese traders, and the Zen practice of the tea ceremony was taking off, and the popularity with the ruling shogun class. All the various wagashi recipes can be traced back to one singular recipe of yokan, which originally was a combination of hardened animal gelatin from sheep, sugar, and red bean paste. Because the practice of Zen Buddhism forbids the killing of animals, wheat flour was used, and eventually agar in the 17th century. The intricate practices of Tsutsumu perfectly capture the two distinctly Japanese philosophies of wa and mano no ware so beautifully, because its purpose is not just to preserve and protect items in transport or storage, but to heighten the experience of everyday activities such as eating or getting ready beyond what we commonly view with a contemporary lens as consumption and disposal, but as a set of rituals aimed to capture the experiences of living and understanding the importance of beauty. Something as seemingly simple as a means of preservation has over time taken entirely new meaning as a symbolic gesture of Japanese life as an art form. It is often in these intricate displays of tightly bound dried fish, carefully woven egg cradles, and folded paper pastry boxes that we see human ingenuity as an extension of nature and symbolic of something deeper about enriching the experiences of life through time and effort. Perhaps many of the huge issues we face today as a globalized world have arisen because we have lost our connection with the natural world, or we have been taught to treat resources as nothing but disposable and to be consumed quickly and disposed of. In this age-old practice, there is a possible grain of wisdom of building an equitable and culturally enriching future in which presentation is beyond a simple ways to get somebody to buy something or grab attention, but to really understand something and see the efforts it has taken to be in your hands. And this is a video, still from a video showing a Japanese craftsman creating traditional tamago suto with discarded rice stalks that have been dried. And these are some questions to consider. You could pick any, really. But some that I have been considering are, do you think these practices should be utilized more widely as an alternative to more wasteful practices, or should they be respected and studied as something distinctly cultural? Is there a common ground between learning from other cultural practices that don't belong to our own kind of bodies, or and respecting practices as something sacred and delicate? Does visual beauty through presentation influence your food choices or purchases? Is the wrapping sometimes more important than the context within? Does the active presentation and wrapping add emotional value to an object through repeated touch and response, or is it a wasteful distraction? Depends on what it is. Does physically consuming something beautiful enrich our lives through deeper level of understanding through connection? Do our senses capture information and sensations that cannot be described through words? How does form and function influence your daily life and design practices? Is it more important that design be ergonomic to our bodies and responsive to our natural surroundings, or be representative of our own unique identities and personalities? Does the transience of objects and experiences make them more impactful and memorable, or frightening to think about as something that could end quickly? And this is interesting because how do you think this affects our social relationships in the 21st century and our value to material culture as something that is moving so quickly and changes so quickly? And that wraps up. Thank you for listening.